All right, so let's look at how TYT is explaining this trans boxer controversy that's erupted at the Olympics. It seems like even they have some issues with what's really going on. So let's look at what's going on.
Khif, they say, has identified as a woman his whole life. They say there's no indication Khif is trans. So the Olympics thinks it's fair.
I just want to be very clear. I don't care what you identify as. It's about what you are. If you were born a male, went through male puberty, and have all those male advantages, you can't compete with women. That's the reason why we segregate the sexes. So whatever you identify with is nonsense, right? It's what you are. That's what we're talking about. So, I'm with Jesse when he says that. If it's just I feel like a woman, if I wake up and I say I feel like a woman and go break the women's bench pressing record, that's ridiculous. So yeah, I agree with Jesse with this. We're starting off hot.
For a genetic male to punch a woman so hard in the face she quits and cries, as long as it says female on her passport. And they're going to let this guy keep beating up women in Paris and they're just going to hand him a gold medal for it?
So that was obviously gross. I mean, it was Jesse Waters. You knew that it was going to be pretty gross. It also represents another retreat on the right where before they would claim that they want to focus on biological women who have the right genitals. Well, now that's not good enough. So he's taken a step back from biological woman to genetic woman.
So the argument basically, and it's not been just from the right, it's been from everybody with the brain, is that there are physical advantages that men have over women when it comes to sports and athletics. Men are faster, stronger. It's well documented over the history of our civilization, right? We know this to be a fact of a reality in the world we live in. Now, those on the left, like this guy you see on screen, want to pretend that a biological man could wake up one day and say, I'm a woman, and really be a woman. And all those advantages we're supposed to ignore. But most rational people know that that's not the case. I can bring up Leah Thomas and all these other men who've transitioned to women and dominated in women's sports. It's obviously unfair. And the reason why we segregate men from women was because of this reason. Now, in this particular case, the person that we're talking about, the boxer Iman Khif, has an XY chromosome, making them genetically a male. But their genitals and sex organs are female because they have a genetic abnormality. They have a condition which, even though they have XY chromosomes, they have female sex organs. So their male sex organs didn't develop, but they developed into female sex organs. So now it's begging the next question is this person a male or is this person a female? Now, generally with the Olympics, it's all about competitive advantage. If you have an XY chromosome but don't have any of those advantages that men have, then generally you can compete with women because you don't have those advantages that men have over women. And that's what the argument for this boxer is, that even though this boxer has XY chromosomes, genetically as a male, that person didn't have all the advantages of male puberty.
So, Khif is an amateur boxer. Won a silver medal at the 2022 International Boxing Association Championship, had previously gotten a silver back in the previous Olympics. IBA President Umar Kremlev claimed last year that a previous disqualification from a competition last year were because, quote, it was proven they have XY chromosomes. They, a reference to she, so the misgendering continues.
So obviously this guy's, he's an idiot, right? He's like, whatever. But this is correct. They were disqualified because they were found to have XY chromosomes. Now, as you can see, this person won a silver medal, and if they had this super genetic advantage, they would have won the gold medal, right? If it was this overwhelming advantage. But they've lost against many women before. So in this particular case, it's a little bit more complicated. Just saying this is a man beating up women. It's a person with an XY chromosome who developed physically as a woman and didn't transition from being male to woman. So he's correct in saying this person didn't transition from being a man to a woman. This person was always a woman, but just genetically has different chromosomes.
Now, males typically have XY chromosomes while females typically have XX chromosomes. However, there is the differences of sex development group of conditions. This is a rare condition, but it involves genes, hormones, and reproductive organs. Some people with DSDs are raised as female but have XY sex chromosomes and blood testosterone levels in the male range. So you can have elevated testosterone. So that hormone can be different than might be expected. Now, we don't know if Khif really has DSD. The entire world is collectively making a whole bunch of assumptions and speculation about what this individual.
She doesn't. I'm going to explain why she doesn't.
Exactly. Well, I'm saying a lot of people are weighing in that are suddenly becoming experts in all this.
Now, it's interesting because in my last video, I looked at the Piers Morgan. He did an article in The Sun, and I looked up a couple of other research articles, and they all said that Imani had Swyer syndrome, which is a syndrome in which you have XY chromosomes, but develop female genitalia, and you develop into a female, and you're almost indistinguishable from XX female until you try to reproduce. If you try to have a baby, then that's when people find out that they're sterile because they're actually XY females. But no one knows that for a fact. I trusted Piers Morgan and their researchers on their side, but no one actually knows for a fact if the person does have Swyer syndrome. That assumption is due because Algeria is heavily anti-trans. So it's illegal to be gay in Algeria, and you get 3 years in prison for it. So for this person to be Algerian, have an Algerian passport that says they're female, and then be at the Olympics, it would be shocking that Algeria would allow someone who is transgender to be representing them in the Olympics for the past, 2 or 3 Olympics. So that's why most people are saying this person probably just has Swyer syndrome, where they genetically have an XY chromosome, but physically present as a woman. And physically, in all of the ways, is a woman with a vagina and ovaries and all of the other stuff, except they have the wrong chromosomes.
But in a statement this week, the IBA said that women did not undergo a testosterone examination, but a separate and recognized test, they say. The statement added that the test and results are confidential. And the IOC, which is overseeing the boxing competition that we're talking about here, does not test for gender, and there never has been any evidence that either Khif or fellow boxer Lin Yuting had XY chromosomes or elevated levels of testosterone. They have competed for years, including at the Tokyo Olympics and several world championships. Khif, by the way, has lost 9 times in international bouts to other women. That said, we have a lot that we're gonna get into, including some of the initial tweets that went viral and made this a massive thing, but what do you think?
Okay, so first let's discuss how all this came about in the first place. That'll show you exactly why this nonsense story came up and is completely untrue. And then we'll get into why the Republicans are obsessed with this and how it's going to be their undoing, so that'll be fun. Jesse Waters said, they say this about her, they say that. Who's they? So I was curious, who's saying it? Because if it turns out she failed a test, and this to the great frustration of a lot of people on the left, I do think past high school that it's okay for organizations, whether it's professional organizations or the Olympics, to do testing and to say, hey, we're going to even exclude trans athletes. Okay, so a lot of the people on the left will disagree with me on that. Some of you, obviously some folks on this panel disagree with that. So I'll come back to the politics of that in a second.
I agree with Cenk on this point, right? If you're trans, if you're a physical, biological, went through male puberty male, you can't compete with biological men. That's the reason why we have the protected category for women, so they can win. If there was no women's category, women wouldn't win anything at the Olympics. That's the reason why we have the 2 separate categories.
Will say, and I will push back because I do feel like some of the anti-trans athlete speak is a slippery slope into broader anti-trans behavior and also policing of athletes writ large beyond Khif. Earlier this week, a rugby player for the American team, Ilona Maher, was called a man because she's 6'6" and a massive unit. And she successfully helped that team win bronze, the very first time an American team has won a medal in rugby. And she was called a man. Why? Because she's big, because she's a rugby player. And so when we start to say that trans people can't play in Olympic sports, right? They can't play in the sport of their chosen gender. Then we start to, everyone becomes a cop, and everyone starts to look at everyone's makeup and their muscles and their cheekbones and what looks different and what they think in their subjective mind a woman or a man should and does look like. And so I just want to say that sometimes when we traffic in these ideas that trans people should not be able to participate in sports at these levels, it does lead to things like Jesse Waters openly saying that on primetime television. And I want to just center that when we stand with trans people, yes, even trans athletes, that all goes away and we stand with them no matter what. But you start to dabble and you open up, everyone becomes genital police. And I just have to push back on that. And
Okay, I have to disagree heavily with this. There's always been standards because we're talking about sports at the elite level. For instance, in boxing, there are weight standards. You don't put a 300-pounder in with a 100-pounder, right? Because it's dangerous, right? That's the reason why we segregate men and women, because we know it's dangerous to have men who are faster, stronger, a lot more muscle mass competing against women who have less of those qualities, because men could kill those women. They can kill each other. That's why we, even in boxing, we separate the weights to such a degree where if you're 1 pound over this particular weight, you can't box, right? You have to make the weight. So this whole, if we continue to police it that way, this is going to make this whole, everybody's going to be this genital police. That's just not the case. It's very simple. We segregate the sexes, right? If you're a woman, if you have these physical characteristics, if you didn't go through male puberty, you compete with this group of people who also don't have any of those male advantages. And then everyone else, right? Everyone else can compete with the men. So if you're transgender, you can compete in the men's category. If you're a woman, you can compete in the men's category. The men's category is actually called the open category because it doesn't matter what your gender is. It's literally called the open category. Anyone can compete with the men. If you are the fastest person alive, you can run the men's 100 meter. It doesn't matter. But for women, they actually is the place where you segregate and say, hey, to run in this is protected because we know that if we didn't isolate, if we didn't protect women from competing with men, then they wouldn't win anything. They wouldn't win the gold medal in run. There would be no track and field women's champion. It would all be men. So that's what we're protecting. Now, what she's trying to do is just make it seem like, hey, if you wake up one morning and say I'm a woman, I can just go and compete with the women. That's unfair and it's dangerous. And if she doesn't understand that, then she's an idiot.
So, first of all, when you have an extreme position, you have an extreme position that says, no, we don't ever ask anyone. And I think the Olympics position is actually absurd. They don't do any genetic testing. They don't do any testing. So you could, since they don't do any testing at all, you can just walk in, call yourself a female, not be trans. Trans people are actually.
Do it, Jane, do it.
Okay, yeah, all right, well, you could say it, but then what's gonna happen?
Rugby,
Somebody's gonna do it, and they're gonna get away with it, and then everybody's gonna be furious, okay? It's, all right, I can't stand it. And it doesn't help trans people at all to have these extreme positions. Oh, yeah, don't test anyone, just take their word for it. I think it's terrible politics.
It's not an extreme position, it comes from a position of human rights.
It is an extreme position. It's not a human rights position. It's a dangerous position. It's a position that essentially sets women, what she's actually advocating for is destroying women's sports, is that no women would ever win anything ever again. She is advocating a position to destroy women's athletics. That's what she's advocating for. And she's trying to coach it in this, hey, it's a human rights position. No, it's a position to destroy women's sports. We literally have Title IX in place because of this same issue, because women weren't winning anything. They weren't getting any scholarships, and the government said, hey, we need to make this fair so women can have an equal chance at athletic opportunity. We have Title IX. So if you think about it, what this woman is advocating for is destroying Title IX in all women's sports. And she knows it, but she's going to try to play it. She's trying to play in the heartstrings. This is about human rights versus the reality of the situation.
And it does help.
It's
all
not a
people.
human right to compete in the other gender's
What you see there is what you just saw are women, are biological women being attacked for being trans because of the anti-trans athletic narrative that has already festered and has now come for these women. And so what are the women to do? Say, I'm not a man. In fact, screw, like, I'm not a trans man. Are you kidding me? No. We all stand in solidarity together. That's how we actually fight the right when it comes to their bull crap culture wars that lead nowhere, and it doesn't serve. Look, I understand, Cenk. You're in the majority. You're in the majority. I'm in the minority. Most people disagree that trans athletes should participate in Olympic sports. Most people don't agree with me. But hell, man, I'm willing to stand on a hill that is unpopular and fight for people and for their human rights.
Yeah, look, we could spend an hour debating this, and I have in the past. But when—
Not really, though.
Yeah.
Not really. Not really debate, more of an agreement.
Okay, whatever. I'm happy to debate anybody about it. I don't agree.
Okay.
And you're never going to get me to agree by saying it's the left-wing position, it's the pro-trans position. I don't think it's a pro-trans position at all.
You should just offer a platform.
Okay.
You don't have to agree.
All right. So when your opponent is in the middle of doing something radical, step out of the way and let them do it instead of stepping in the way and saying, hey, I'm more radical. Okay, I think it's—
Shots fired, because her position is an extreme radical position. And she's trying to say, well, this is the reason why we should let all trans people just wake up and say, hey, I'm a man yesterday, but I'm a woman right now, so I can win that gold medal. That's ridiculous. And she knows it's ridiculous, but she wants to die in that hell, so Cenk is letting her die in that hell.
Terrible politics. It's terrible for trans people. I think it's terrible for the LGBTQ community, and I think it's terrible for the people who are looking to defeat Trump. So can we please get out of the way and let the Republicans do the dumb things?
None of them, even after this, will watch a single one. They don't care about women's boxing more than they care about literally any women's sport, to be very, very clear. And on the evaluation of what is a woman, a question they love to ask, they kept saying it's not a social construct. It's not a frame of mind. It's not what you believe yourself to be. It's not an identity. It's in your pants. It's your genitals. Oops, that's not good enough. It's not that, because she has too much testosterone. That's it. It's the hormones. If you change your hormones, then it doesn't matter if you were born with a vagina. You're not anymore because your hormones changed. Now you're a man. But they don't believe that hormone replacement therapy changes your gender. They've never given ground on that. And suddenly that's their retreat point, is if your hormones are out of whack, it doesn't matter what's in your pants.
Well, no, you see, and I think this is the deception now that he's bringing to the argument. And the deception is simple. If you were born a man, raised as a man, go through male puberty, have all those advantages of being a man, that gives you an unfair advantage. That's what the right has always been saying. In this case, I believe these people were acting in good faith, believing that Iman was one of those people who were within that same kind of category, like Aaliyah Thomas, who was born a man and woke up one morning and said, hey, I'm gonna compete with the women, and that's it. Not understanding that this person has just genetic abnormality. And that's what caused this thing. So now they're saying, oh, look, you made a mistake on this. And now, because you made a mistake on this, you're transphobic against everything, which I don't think is accurate. But I think the point still stands that I agree with Cenk on this. You cannot sit there and pretend that women can compete with men at the most elite levels. That is ridiculous. We all know it's ridiculous. It's like I feel like I'm living in a bizarre world, and they're trying to make it seem like either you take it all or you take none of it, which is not the case. We can live in a world where, hey, if you are a biological woman, you've gone through female puberty, you compete with women. If you're born a man and go through male puberty, you compete with men. That's something that's very simple to explain. Now, in this particular case, you have someone who it's a little mix up. They are born a female, but have this XY chromosome. So now we start talking about, does this person have an unfair advantage? And I think some of the stats they talked about earlier, it makes me think, Maybe not. Right? 37 fights, 9 losses, only 5 KOs. They've lost, they're silver medalists. They've lost a whole bunch of times. It doesn't seem like they have a genetic or this huge advantage over other women. But are there situations where people who have this condition do have advantages over XX chromosome women? I just don't know. I'm not Nate the doctor. I'm Nate the lawyer. So I think there's more information I would need. But based on what I'm hearing right now, if she doesn't have any advantage, like if she went through male puberty, I would say no, she absolutely should not be competing. But since she didn't go through male puberty and she has all the female parts, and the only thing you're telling me she only has an XY chromosome, then it's hard for me to justify keeping her out. Because it's like, well, why? And maybe you guys can answer that question in the comment section, why? I can't answer the question why they should be kept out. Because the reason why generally is because they've gone through male puberty. And that's where men get all the advantages. Before male puberty, there's no difference in strength, speed, anything. They're all the same, men and women. It's after male puberty where those advantages happen. So if you're telling me you have this person who hasn't gotten those advantages through male puberty, then it's hard for me to say, let's keep that person out of female sports. And that on top of that, the person has a vagina and all the female parts. It'll be hard for me to do. But again, maybe he'll say something to convince me. I don't know.
Yeah.
And I do know it's a minority, and all I have to say, all I am saying is that if and when there is a trans athlete, can we stand with them? And can we see and tie our own liberation together and our own defense against this bigotry together?
You are the bigot, though. You are the bigot. You are trying to destroy women's sports. The bigotry is on your end. Women's sports have been protected. It's protected in law. It's been protected in the United States. It's been protected all over the world. Just so we all understand, the Olympics didn't start off with men and women's sports. It was all men's sports, right? And if women could compete, they would just go into, but there was never a woman to ever win anything. And then guess what? Somebody said, well, listen, obviously it's unfair to force women to try to compete against the men. So let's separate this. Let's have a women's competition and men's competition. Be like, okay, that makes sense. We'll do it both, right? And then you have now women's and men's sports. So she wants to go back to the time when there was no women's sports. That's what she wants to go to. So she's actually promoting the bigotry, but it's easier to say the other side's promoting bigotry when if you just listen to what she's saying. She's literally saying biological men at their most elite levels should dominate biological women's sports. Let's start with track and field. Women wouldn't have a chance. This is the most regressive, I think, the left is. And she has to own it. She's right. She's in a minority because it doesn't make any sense. It's illogical. It's illogical.
And me as a feminist, me as a cisgender woman, I believe that my own liberation, my fight against that misogyny that John's talking about, if someone were to call me a man, say, I'm not a man, but also I stand with trans people, I stand with trans athletes. And I hope that we will see that eventually one day, even for those 7 people, I do think it matters.
Yeah, all right, last thing I'll say on it is, similar to what John was saying, Iman Khif has lost 9 matches, but they're convinced, oh my God, this is a giant issue. She's dominating the sport. So when I was gonna make a similar point about Lineker, she won the 1500 meter race by 17 seconds.
That's insane.
It's unheard of. There was no one else in the frame. It looked like there was no one else in the pool. You know how many of the top 20 times in the top swimming race, Katie Lineker has come in #1? In other words, she owns the record of the top 20, all 20. She has all 20 of the fastest times, okay? She's unbelievable. So they don't care who's actually dominant in the sport. They don't actually care about the competition. Oh, well, look, man, if you have a man, you can't compete and blah, blah, blah. Katie Lineker's killing them, no matter who's in the race, right? They don't care, that it's unfair that she has a genetic advantage because she's better than them, right? That's the whole point of the Olympics. All they care about is how do we get people to focus all their hatred on people that are in the LGBTQ community.
This is where Cenk loses me. Because he knows that she is a biological woman in every way. Female puberty, she's 100% biological woman. If she was a male, we'd have an issue with that, right? Because if you take what she's doing and put her in the male pool, she wouldn't win a thing. Take her times and put them up against them and she wouldn't win a thing. She could destroy the women, but she wouldn't win against the men. And that's what we're saying. Her fastest time probably wouldn't even qualify for the Olympics against the men. And Cenk knows that. But again, this is the hate train. They got to continue the hate train.
So Khalifa is not dominant in the sport. It doesn't matter. They're just using it as an excuse to attack that community because their whole point is hatred. That's why this is so dumb politically. They keep assuming that the average American is as hateful as they are, and they're incorrect. Let's step out of the way and let them clown themselves.
All right, so let me know what you think about TYT's take on the Olympic boxer issue. I honestly am embarrassed for them because I think at the end of the day, this issue is pretty simple. If this was a biological male who went through male puberty, I'm all on the train. They shouldn't be able to compete. This is a complicated issue. There's nuance to this. I think a lot of people miss the nuance because everybody wants to be first with the whole, outrage and get the news out there first. And now that people have figured out, hey, this may be a little bit more nuanced than we first thought, let people reevaluate because you get more information. I think it's okay to be wrong, but I also think it's okay to then go back and say, hey, this is where I was wrong. I thought this was the case, but now I think this is the case because I have more information. I think giving your opponent that respect makes you a better person. Now, what they've done is just raise all these ill motives to their opponents, right? Everybody on the right is just, matter of fact, they're doing to the right what the right does to them. Overgeneralizing, they just hate it and giving them all these motives. They just want to hate trans people. They want this, they want this, they want this. Instead of saying, I believe they may have just been misinformed. And now with this new information, maybe they all have different opinions. But that being said, tell me where I'm wrong in the comment section. Tell me if you think that I'm wrong, that my opinions on this issue don't make sense. If you can't, don't forget to like, subscribe, do all the great YouTube stuff. My name is Lori, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.